Okay, let's unpack this. When we talk about the great flood narratives, the really dramatic stories from Genesis, our minds usually jump straight to Noah, the ark.
And maybe those infamous fallen angels, the Watchers, descending on Mount Hermon. It's a huge image.
Totally. Heavenly beings, breaking rank, corrupting the earth. It's cinematic, really.
It really is. It's like the ultimate disaster movie opening scene. And we tend to focus so much on the giants they supposedly produced, the Nephilim and the whole theological scandal of the angels themselves. Semjaza, the leader, Azazel teaching forbidden stuff.
Right, Azazel, the notorious one. But the thing is, the actual biblical account back in Genesis 6, it's surprisingly, well, sparse, isn't it?
Extremely sparse. It leaves this enormous interpretive vacuum, especially around one crucial group, the women involved, the daughters of men.
Exactly. And that gap, that sort of silence in the original text, that's what we're really diving into today. Because this deep dive, based on our sources, it suggests the whole downfall of the ancient world, it wasn't just kicked off by angelic lust. There might have been human complicity involved. We're looking at the moral agency and the really terrifying ultimate fate of the women they married.
Yeah, and that brings us to the core question, doesn't it? Our mission today, if you like.
What's that?
Were these mothers of the Nephilim just innocent victims caught up in something terrible, or were they actually active, maybe even powerful agents of corruption themselves? Did they embrace that forbidden power?
That's the heart of it. And to answer that, we have to go beyond Genesis.
Absolutely. We're pulling heavily from that rich tradition of Second Temple literature, that really vital period, roughly 500 BCE to 70 CE.
Crucial time for developing ideas not explicitly in the main scriptures.
Exactly. We're talking specifically about the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees, and then later looking at how early Christian writers like the really influential Ephraim the Syrian interpreted these stories.
So our source stack, it really zeroes in on how these later traditions took these kind of anonymous women from Genesis
and turned them into morally accountable figures.
Yeah.
Which, as we'll see, leads to a pretty shocking, a long-lasting transformation for them.
Okay, this sounds like we're not just retelling an old story. We're tracing maybe a theological argument about human responsibility, even when faced with, the supernatural.
Precisely. It's about understanding why these later writers felt the need to inject human agency, human blame perhaps, into what Genesis just states as, well, a fact.
Okay, then let's get into the details. Let's start with that Enoch account, because it really paints the picture Genesis leaves blank, doesn't it? #2, the core narrative and the gap in Genesis, the setup.
It absolutely does. It provides the narrative color. So the story in Enoch kicks off with a demographic observation almost.
Right. It says something like, it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, basically. Lots of people.
That in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. So human beauty is there. It's the fuse.
But the ignition, that comes from a dove.
Exactly. The text says the angels, the children of the heaven, they saw these women, they lusted after them, and then, and this is key, they made a pact, a binding oath sworn on Mount Hermon.
Not just a random impulse, then. A plan.
A plan. A collective agreement that they would choose wives from among humanity and, quote, beget us children. It wasn't just falling. It was a conscious mutual rebellion against the divine order.
Yeah.
They knew what they were doing.
And the rebellion wasn't just the sex, though the text is clear. They began to go in unto them and to defile themselves with them.
What happens immediately after is crucial, right? This corrupt exchange idea.
Right away, they start teaching forbidden knowledge. It's presented as almost simultaneous. This transaction is vital to understanding the whole thing.
So not just a physical union, but a knowledge transfer, a deeply corrupting one. They taught them charms and enchantments and the cutting of roots and made them acquainted with plants. It's essentially magic, maybe pharmacology mixed with sorcery. It's a covenant, but a twisted one, designed to give humans power to subvert the natural world.
And the immediate result of this union, this exchange, the Nephilim.
The giants. And the text describes them in a way that immediately signals, something's gone terribly wrong with the natural order.
Yeah, it says the women became pregnant and bore great giants whose height was 3,000 ells. We should probably pause on that number.
We really should. Because 3,000 ells, it's not meant to be taken literally, biologically.
Let's break that down for you listening. An L, it's an old measurement, maybe around 45 inches, give or take.
Something like that. So 3,000 times 45 inches.
Yeah.
We're talking about, what, over 11,000 feet?
More than 2 miles tall.
It's insane. It's cosmic level hyperbole. Exactly. The writers aren't describing an actual species. They're trying to convey absolute catastrophe, a violation of scale, offspring that are just fundamentally incompatible with the world they're born into, it sets the stage for the violence that follows.
And that violence kicks off immediately. Their existence just spirals into chaos. The giants, they consume everything.
Every resource, all the acquisitions of men, the text says. But when human food runs out, well, that's when it gets truly horrific.
They turn on humans themselves, start to devour mankind.
Their hunger is portrayed as completely unnatural, unending. And it doesn't stop with humans. They then start sinning against animals, birds, beasts, reptiles, fish.
It's like a wave of consumption washing over creation.
And then the final grim detail.
Yeah.
Once even those sources are gone, they're so consumed by this monstrous nature, they start eating each other, devouring one another's flesh and drinking blood. Cannibalism on a giant scale.
Just total cosmic breakdown. And there's that line, often overlooked, about the ultimate consequence.
Ah, yes, the earth itself fights back. It says the earth laid accusation against the lawless ones. The planet itself, almost like a moral agent, is crying out because of the sheer weight of this corruption.
The world needed cleansing. But going back to what you said earlier, it's fascinating how the original text, Genesis, leaves such a gap here.
It really does. If you just read Genesis 6, verses 1 to 4, it's incredibly brief. It just reports the union, sons of God, daughters of men, they cook wives. And it mentions the Nephilim existed.
Well, basically it.
Pretty much. Genesis doesn't really spell out the angels' motive beyond, they saw that they were fair.
Yeah.
It definitely doesn't detail the women's side of it.
Yeah.
Were they willing? Were they involved in this knowledge exchange Enoch describes? Genesis is silent.
And that silence, that ambiguity, that's the key, you're saying. It's absolutely critical because it allowed these later traditions, especially the ones really grappling with human sin and why such a catastrophic flood was necessary, it allowed them to ask the hard questions. If the flood was, at least partly, humanity's fault, well, how much agency did these women have?
They couldn't just be passive bystanders. Otherwise, the scale of the divine judgment later, it doesn't quite add up in that theological framework, does it?
Exactly. There needed to be some level of human culpability to justify the near total destruction. So, because Genesis just says the watchers took wives.
Later interpreters could pivot and ask, okay, did the women just submit? Or did they maybe actively solicit this? Did they want this supernatural connection to gain power?
And as we're about to see, the tradition that really gained steam, well, it's strongly leaned towards that second interpretation, complicity.
Right. It feels natural, maybe especially for us today, to read this and sympathize with the women, see them as victims of these powerful fallen angels' predation, essentially. Yeah. That's the modern instinct, perhaps. But the source material we're looking at, Enoch, Jubilees, Ephraim, they actively push back against that reading. They're not painting a picture of innocent virgins frolicking who were just swept up in this.
They're arguing complicity.
Strongly. They argue these women weren't just passively taught charms and enchantments. No, they actively pursued the watchers. They enticed them, seduced them.
And the motivation wasn't love or something innocent.
According to these texts, no. It was a hunger. A desire for supernatural power, for status, for secrets that only a union with these heavenly beings could possibly provide.
Okay, so this is where the identity of the parents becomes really, really contested in the different traditions, creating these two major competing interpretations.
That's right. Two different ways of explaining the same disastrous outcome, but both end up condemning the women's actions.
Let's take the first one, the one we've mostly been discussing from Enoch and Jubilees.
That's the fallen angels' view. Simple enough. Sons of God, fallen angels, daughters of men, human women. Now, these women are objects of lust, yes, but the narrative, especially in Enoch with the knowledge exchange, strongly frames it as, well, a mutual decision, a kind of sexual knowledge-sharing corrupt exchange.
So even if they were tempted or lusted after, they participated, they made a choice, which makes them morally accountable.
That's the core of the fallen angels' interpretation regarding the women. It's a supernatural corruption model, and it demands their moral responsibility.
But then there's this other, equally powerful view, the righteous lineage view. And this one comes strongly from Ephraim the Syrian, who is a huge figure in early Christianity.
A massively respected voice. And his interpretation, well, it sidesteps the angels completely. It offers a totally different context for the corruption, making it internal to humanity, social almost.
How does he do that? No angels involved.
For Ephraim, it's all about bloodlines. His theology emphasized two distinct lineages right from the start of humanity. You had the line of Seth tracing down to Noah that was the righteous bloodline, meant to preserve faith and godliness.
Okay, the good guys.
Basically. And then you had Cain's lineage, marked by murder, materialism, living apart from God. That was the corrupt, ungodly bloodline, cursed even.
So in Ephraim's reading of Genesis 6, who are the sons of God?
They're not angels. They are the sons of Seth, the righteous people of God descended from Adam's virtuous son.
And the daughters of men they saw and took his wives.
They are specifically the daughters of Cain, the women from the corrupted, cursed lineage.
Ah, okay. So the sin wasn't supernatural beings mixing with humans. It was the righteous line mixing with the unrighteous line.
That's the absolute key for Ephraim. The world didn't need angels to fall into chaos. It just needed the faithful to be seduced and corrupted by the faithless. And he's very specific about how it happened. He describes the daughters of Cain as active agents of temptation. He writes that they adorned themselves. They used forbidden jewelry, makeup, enticing clothing. Basically, using worldly beauty and charm specifically to lure the sons of Seth away from their piety. They became a snare to the eyes of the sons of Seth.
So in this version, the women are explicitly proactive seducers, using their appearance, their worldliness, to corrupt the righteous men.
Exactly. And Ephraim goes on to detail the moral collapse that happened immediately after these unions took place. It wasn't just about individual lust. It exploded into social chaos and arrogance among the formerly righteous Sethites.
What kind of chaos? What examples does he give?
Well, the purity of the righteous line was shattered. They became haughty, obsessed with status and wealth, things they supposedly absorbed from the Canaanite women. Ephraim paints a picture of societal breakdown. A poor one would exalt himself over the wife of a rich man, suggesting adultery and status climbing. An old man would sin with one who was young. And even the ugliest of all would act arrogantly over the most beautiful.
Wow. So it's about rampant lust, yes, but also pride, the complete overturning of social order, humility, and piety, all stemming from these marriages.
That's Ephraim's argument. The corruption came from within humanity, triggered by the seductive power of the daughters of Cain.
Okay, so if we take these two huge traditions, the Enochic view with angels and the Ephraimic view with Sethites and Cainites, they arrive from different directions, but they seem to land on the same moral conclusion about the women.
They absolutely do. Regardless of whether the fathers were angels from heaven or righteous men from the line of Seth, both traditions treat the women as knowing participants in illicit unions. They bear moral responsibility for the ensuing corruption.
They're painted as morally corrupt themselves, consumed by the desires of the flesh, whether for power or for worldly status.
Yes, and the early Christian writers who followed Ephraim, they really picked up on this. They saw this whole sequence, whether it was the angel unions or the Sethite intermarriage, as part of a deliberate evil program.
Now, our source material mentions something interesting here, that some of these early writers drew a direct line, a parallel, between this ancient transgression and, well, behaviors they saw as corrupt in their own time.
Yes, and we need to report this impartially, as it's in the sources. They definitely projected their contemporary concerns back onto these ancient figures. They saw the actions of the antediluvian women, their supposed lust for power, their use of adornment and seduction reflected in women of their own era who, in their view, chased wealth, status, or engaged in practices they considered witchcraft or, sex magic.
So they weren't just analyzing an old story, they were using it as a cautionary tale, seeing those ancient women as archetypes of female-driven corruption.
Very much so. It frames the women's actions not as passive surrender, but as a conscious, almost diabolical transaction. Trading their bodies, their lineage, for secrets, for influence, or power over men. It shifts the dynamic entirely from tragedy to calculated wickedness from their perspective.
That's a crucial context. It connects the original sin of these women, this desire for forbidden power or status, directly to the world needing the flood. It emphasizes mutual accountability. Both sides made a corrupt deal, hashtag 5V, the corrupt exchange and forbidden knowledge.
Yeah, that idea of the exchange is central, especially in the Enochic tradition. Let's circle back to the Watchers' Rebellion itself for a moment.
The Pact on Mount Hermon?
Right. It wasn't just a random descent, it was organized. A unified rebellion against the divine order with leaders like Semjaza and, critically for the knowledge part, Azazel.
And their relationship with the women, you're saying it was explicitly transactional. That's the foundation for why both sides get punished later.
Absolutely. The angels got wives, companionship, maybe release from celestial loneliness, who knows?
Yeah.
But the women received secrets, supernatural knowledge, power. And these secrets, according to Enoch, were the very engines that drove the global collapse.
And we're not talking about simple folk wisdom here.
No. The Watchers taught sophisticated, often destructive arts, things that fundamentally corrupted human existence and the earth itself. We should probably break down the main categories of this forbidden knowledge.
Good idea. Where should we start? Maybe with Azazel's contributions, since he's so often named.
Makes sense? Azazel is credited most famously with teaching metallurgy, specifically how to work metals to create weapons, swords and knives and shields and breastplates.
So the invention of advanced warfare, replacing maybe simpler conflicts with industrialized violence.
That's the implication. But metallurgy wasn't just about weapons in this account. It was also about vanity.
How so?
Azazel also taught them how to make mirrors and how to craft expensive ornaments, jewelry, and crucially, cosmetics. Things like the beautifying of the eyelids or painting eyebrows using antimony and working with precious stones.
Wait, so the same angel taught humans how to make swords and makeup?
According to Enoch, yes. And in this theological view, the connection is deliberate. Working metal leads to weapons, which leads to violence. But it also leads to ornamentation, mirrors, cosmetics, which leads to vanity, pride, focusing on the superficial, and ultimately seduction and moral corruption.
Wow. So the technology of killing and the technology of lust, they come from the same fallen source, taught together. That's a powerful statement.
It really is. It suggests a deep link between violence and vanity as corrupting forces.
Okay, what about the more esoteric knowledge, not just physical crafts?
Right. That's where things like astrology come in. The Watchers taught the secrets of the heavens, the courses of the moon, the paths of the stars, signs in the sky, divination.
And why was that considered so bad? Isn't that just early astronomy?
From a theological perspective back then, no. It was seen as fatal because it diverted human attention and, critically, worship away from the Creator, God, and towards the creation, the sun, moon, stars. It essentially formalized paganism, polytheism, star worship, a direct violation of the first commandments.
Okay, so it wasn't just scientific curiosity in their view. It was leading humanity away from God, getting them to look for guidance and power in the cosmos instead of from heaven. Spiritual subversion.
Precisely. And alongside that, you have the teaching of enchantments, charms, and magic. Remember the cutting of roots and knowledge of plants.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier. Sounds like herbalism.
It was likely more than that. Think pharmacology mixed with sorcery. Spells, incantations, ways to manipulate reality, maybe heal, maybe curse, but critically, exerting power over others and the natural world through means that weren't divine. This was seen as the ultimate usurpation of God's authority over creation.
Okay, putting it all together, metallurgy for war and vanity, astrology for false worship, magic for manipulating reality, this context makes it much clearer why the women in this tradition couldn't possibly be seen as innocent bystanders.
Exactly. If they actively received this knowledge, maybe even demanded it as part of the bargain, and then presumably helped spread it, they become facilitators. They help transform human culture from whatever it was before, maybe simple agrarian piety, into something driven by technology, warfare, vanity, and occult power.
It paints a picture of a trade with truly epic consequences. The angels gave up their heavenly status, yes, but the women received tools that amplified human wickedness to a level that, in this narrative, required the entire world to be wiped clean.
And therefore, accountability was necessary for both parties involved in the exchange. The judgment had to fall on everyone who participated.
Right. So the corruption reaches this critical mass. The Nephilim are rampaging, consuming everything, even each other. The earth itself is crying out, and eventually those cries of humanity, they reach heaven.
And heaven responds, not just with the flood eventually, but first with a direct intervention. The deployment of the highest powers, the four great archangels, Michael, Raphael, Gabriel, and Uriel.
And it sounds less like a general command and more like a highly organized operation, almost military.
Very much so. A systemic dismantling of the rebellion. Each archangel gets a specific assignment, tailored not just to fixing the problem on Earth, but also, it seems, to delivering a kind of psychological punishment to the main offenders.
Okay, let's break down those assignments. What about the leaders of the Watchers, Semjaza and Azaza?
Michael, who's often seen as the warrior archangel, the commander of heaven's armies, he gets Semjaza. The order is to bind him and his main followers, the ones who swore the oath with him, in the valleys of the earth.
Imprisonment.
Imprisonment until the final great day of judgment. A holding pattern, essentially, for the primary leader of the pact. Raphael, though, he gets a more complex dual mission.
What's that?
First, Raphael is sent to heal the earth, to cleanse it specifically from the defilement and corruption the Watchers and their teachings had introduced. But then he has to deal with Zal.
And Azazel's fate sounds particularly harsh in the descriptions, more specific than some Jaws's.
It really does. It seems designed to reflect his specific crime-teaching, metallurgy, and corrupting arts. Raphael is commanded to bind Azazel hand and foot, completely immobilize him, and then cast him into the darkness,
Where exactly?
into a specific desert place called Dudal. And Dudal isn't just, an empty patch of sand in these texts. It's described as a terrifying location, a place of absolute darkness. And there, Azazel is to be covered with rough and jagged rocks, stones of darkness.
Covered with jagged rocks. The very materials may be used for the weapons and hard tools he taught humanity make. Is there a kind of symbolic justice there?
It certainly feels like it, a kind of perverse, poetic justice. He's eternally buried, crushed by the hard, sharp elements he tried to master and teach others to master for destructive ends. It ensures he's totally isolated, cut off from the world he helped corrupt.
Until the final judgment, when he'll be cast into the fire.
Exactly. Total isolation now, total destruction later.
Okay, so Michael handles Samjaza, Raphael handles Azazel and heals the earth. What about the Nephilim themselves, the giant offspring?
That assignment falls to Gabriel. Gabriel is sent to destroy them, to wipe out the bastards and the reprobates, the offspring of the Watchers.
How does Gabriel fight them?
Interestingly, the text emphasizes that Gabriel is sent to incite them against each other, set them one against the other, that they may destroy each other in battle. So their destruction is framed as an acceleration of the self-destructive chaos they already embodied. Gabriel just pushes it over the edge, ensuring the physical cleansing of the earth from their presence.
A grim task. And finally, Uriel. He often seems to be the messenger, the one who reveals things.
And that's his role here, too. Uriel's commanded to go to Noah, warn him about the impending flood, explain what's happening, and instruct him on how to escape. Basically, ensuring the preservation of the one righteous lineage through the coming destruction.
So the plan is comprehensive. Leaders imprisoned, offspring destroyed, earth healed, righteous warned. And the Watchers themselves, the fathers, they end up condemned to this long imprisonment, specifically under the hills of the earth.
Right, locked away. They won't return to heaven. But maybe the most profound part of their initial punishment, before the final fire, is psychological.
What do you mean?
They are imprisoned before their Nephilim sons are destroyed. And the texts emphasize they will not be able to see it happen.
Yeah.
They won't even be able to intercede or watch as the results of their rebellion are wiped out above them. Complete separation from their progeny and their failed legacy.
Wow. That adds another layer of torment. They're just locked away, waiting for the end, knowing everything they did is being undone.
Exactly. But this brings us back to the women, the human mothers. They were complicit, according to these traditions. They were mortal, yes, but their sin had these catastrophic supernatural consequences. So their punishment, it couldn't just be drowning in the flood with everyone else, could it? It needed to be something more, something lasting.
Something worse, maybe. Which leads us to probably the strangest, most unexpected twist in this whole story.
Yes, we really need to focus now on the unique fate, the transformative judgment that was apparently reserved specifically for these women, the ones who bore the Nephilim.
Because they were morally corrupt, because they traded flesh for forbidden power, their sentence had to reflect the eternal nature of that transgression.
That seems to be the logic. And this very specific fate, it's revealed most clearly in the Greek version of the Book of Enoch. It connects this whole Jewish apocalyptic narrative to the wider mythological world of antiquity.
Okay, what does the Greek Enoch say happened to them?
It's a single, stunning line. And the women who were with the angels became sirens.
Sirens, as in the Greek sirens, the ones who lure sailors.
That's the term used in the Greek translation. It immediately transforms this from just a theological story into something else, an origin story almost, for a well-known type of mythological monster.
Okay, quick question though. Is it likely the original Jewish writer used the word siren? Or is this maybe the Greek translator reaching for a familiar concept? How does that work?
That's a really sharp question. Most scholars think it's the latter. The original Aramaic or Hebrew probably describes some kind of dangerous, seductive, maybe part animal, female spirit or demon, something associated with water or desolate places. When the text was translated into Greek, the translator needed an equivalent.
And siren was the closest fit.
It was a perfect fit for a beautiful but deadly female monster, known specifically for using enchanting songs to lure men to their deaths. It captured the essence of seductive destruction.
And the sirens in Greek myth, they weren't just beautiful women, right? They had monstrous features.
Often depicted as part woman, part bird, sometimes later part fish, like mermaids, but originally more avian. And critically, their power was in their voice. Their songs promised forbidden knowledge or ultimate pleasure, but led only to shipwreck and death on the rocks.
So this transformation into sirens, it's deeply symbolic, isn't it? It's about the distortion of the very thing that started the problem, their beauty.
Exactly. Their physical allure was the initial hook for the Watchers. Now that same allure is twisted into a monstrous form. It's designed to eternally lure others, specifically men, to destruction. They might be physically hideous in their true form, but their power remains seductive. They retain that dangerous charm that kicked off the whole catastrophe.
It feels like a punishment that targets both their body and their spirit. They become living embodiments of temptation, trapped forever, acting out the very sin seduction, leading to ruin that they participated in.
And you could definitely argue that being transformed into an eternal monster temptress is a worse fate than just dying in the flood, because their sin, their corrupting influence, it never really dies. It's given a permanent form.
Wow. And did this idea, this transformation, have legs? Did later traditions pick up on it?
Oh, absolutely. It gained significant theological weight, especially in mystical circles. Later Jewish mystics and some early Christian interpreters, too, they didn't just see these sirens as, creatures from Greek myth plopped into their texts. They saw them as the primordial origin of certain types of demonic entities.
Which types? Are we talking about figures like Lilith or the succubus, those female demons known for nocturnal seduction?
Precisely those kinds of figures. The idea developed that these women didn't just perish or become monsters. They essentially shared the demonic fate of their angelic husbands and giant sons. They became demon spirits themselves. Their punishment wasn't just transformation, it was becoming part of the ongoing spiritual war against humanity.
So the flood cleansed the earth physically, but these transformed women, they persist as a spiritual threat.
That's the interpretation. They linger, maybe at the edges of human existence, shorelines, deserts, maybe even dreams, bound in this form of eternal seduction. They continue the work of corruption, not by bearing giants anymore, but through enchantment, through feeding lust, through creating illusions and temptations.
Oh, it's a terrifyingly neat theological conclusion, isn't it?
It is, in a dark way. The Watchers are physically bound, silent under the earth, waiting for fire. The Nephilim are gone, wiped out. But the mothers, the human element, the ones who willingly traded their mortality for power, they're transformed into these eternally active agents of temptation. The sirens, the succubi, they become the enduring symbol of that original corrupt exchange.
The mechanism of seduction itself is given eternal life, making them arguably an ongoing danger in a way the imprisoned Watchers are not. Hashtag tag 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 7, outro.
So when we trace this whole narrative arc, we really see a journey, don't we? We go from those few ambiguous verses in Genesis.
Right, just the bare facts.
To these incredibly detailed, complex narratives in texts like Enoch, and then interpreted by figures like Ephraim. And the constant thread is establishing the women's agency, their complicity.
Whether they were daughters of Cain using worldly charm to seduce the righteous sons of Seth,
or whether they were ambitious humans making that Faustian bargain with the Watchers, trading flesh for forbidden power, for those secrets like metallurgy, warfare, magic.
Yeah. And the synthesis here, the key takeaway for you listening, it really seems to be this powerful ancient idea of mutual accountability in a corrupt, high-stakes deal.
Forbidden knowledge exchanged for carnal desire and power. And both sides paid an absolutely catastrophic price. The angels, bound and waiting for destruction. The women, permanently transformed into these living symbols of deadly, seductive temptation.
It's a narrative that ensures the human agents of that initial corruption, they don't just disappear with the floodwaters, they get woven into the cosmic fabric as this eternal spiritual warning.
They become part of the ongoing problem.
Which I suppose leads us to a final provocative thought for you to chew on. The Watchers, the powerful angels, they're physically bound under the earth, right? Silent, unable to interact directly. The Nephilim were physically destroyed.
Gone.
But their wives, human women transformed into sirens and succubi. They are, according to this tradition, eternally tasked with corruption. They're still out there, metaphorically or perhaps spiritually, singing their destructive song, continuing the act of seduction.
Still active.
So the question it leaves us with is this. Are the dangers of fallen power, of forbidden knowledge, of corruption, are they still most often delivered, even today, through that same insidious mechanism, through the deceptive agency of temptation, allure, seduction, the very tools the daughters of Cain or the Watchers' wives used to doom the ancient world?
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? If the greatest, most persistent threat isn't always the overt, monstrous power like the Nephilim, but the subtle, ongoing whisper of seduction towards things we shouldn't know or have, then maybe the daughters of Cain, in a way, won the long game.
They're still working while their husbands are locked away.
A chilling thought to end on.
Indeed. Plenty for you to mull over from this deep dive. Until next time, keep digging.